right, well, good evening all. Welcome to the Growth Planning Committee's meeting on May 6th, 2025. And we will start off with introductions of members.
Tom Smith.
Jane Evelyn.
Paul Hogan.
Dan Saunders.
Liz Johnson.
Ann Martin.
Nadia Crockett Current, support staff.
Excellent. Good evening all, and thanks for covering last meetings,
Oh, no
last couple
charge.
meetings, due to my travel. So first on the agenda is a review and approval of minutes from April 15th.
I move that we approve the minutes from April 15th.
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion on those? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain, because I didn't see that one. Okay, thank you very much. Next is a review of the potential language for agritourism, agritainment, in the land use ordinance. So, Planning Department put together an initial draft for us to review. And maybe we can walk through that. Nadia, can you kind of take us through a discussion, maybe bring that up for the viewers?
Yep. Can you let me share my screen?
All right, so I guess you want the monitor.
Yes, please. All right, so it should be coming up in just a second here. Did everybody have a chance to review the language before the meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I marked up my own copy, but I had trouble accessing the Word document,
Okay.
sort of mobilely. It was
Okay.
So very remote, so. But I was able to get a PDF and.
All right, it should be coming up soon here. So I figure we'll go through this kind of the same way that we went through the land use changes, just kind
Sure.
of piece by piece. I'd love to start with just a general overview, though, of, do people have any general thoughts, not language specific, just as kind of the shape the ordinance is taking in this form?
I like the form.
Yeah, I think the form's
It's
fine.
very clear.
Okay.
I was having some thoughts about what we really want to do, and I don't know how it's going to affect everything, but from some of the comments that have been made, it seems like we really don't have farmland, so to speak, because there's only one spot in town where there's really good soil for farms, but there's plenty of places, I guess, where we could have animals grazing that would grow grass, well, or maybe hay. And then I was thinking, the idea is to have farms, or to promote farms, not really to promote entertainment particularly. So why focus on that? Why not, if we want to have farms and fishing and that kind of an atmosphere here, let's promote agriculture, let's promote animal husbandry, goats, cows, pigs, chickens, and encourage the town to have a farmer's market, locally produced meats sold in town and that sort of thing, rather than try to you're not really encouraging farming, you're encouraging entertainment by allowing all the agritourism and agri business, or whatever the other one is. So I don't know, it just sort of went through my mind that if we want to have farms, let's do what we can for our farms as farms, not as tourist attractions.
I think that the two can live together. We have, I mean, our ordinance is pretty flexible towards things like animal husbandry and farming. I think it's allowed in, if not almost every zone. It's allowed in every zone personally, like if it's not for commercial purposes, you're allowed to keep animals and do farming of other varieties as well. And commercially, I think it's allowed in most zones. So, or at least in the ones with the bigger parcels. So I think that the purpose of, I agree with you with what you're saying, and it is in our comprehensive plan to support the farmland and to make farmers markets easier to have and more common in Kennebunkport. But I don't think that the two are necessarily mutually exclusive.
Okay.
I think what we're hearing from Helene is that as a farmer, sometimes they need that supplemental income, that they can't necessarily sustain themselves as a farm with only the actual farming activities. So our intention here is not to turn all of the farms into large event venues, but instead to give them a couple, events a month that they can have that supplements the income that they get just as a regular farming operation.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. I think we're doing this so it's in the ordinance, and should a farm like Helene and others want to go into this, we've got a safety net. We've set this with the sort of the parameters ahead of time. We're not going out there and, advertising to the farming community, hey, let's turn this into this big entertainment business, at all. I really don't want to do that.
I'm afraid that's what's going to happen with this.
Yeah, so
And I agree with you that, when we talked in the comprehensive plan about supporting agritourism, we thought about farms as farms and supporting things that were ancillary to farms and farming. And to me, I never contemplated that meant that we would have weddings with, 250 people without any mass gathering permit, an unlimited number with a mass gathering permit, or a concert with a mass gathering permit. And while the plea was, let's give us some standards, as I went through this, it seems to me it creates as many planning board issues and planning board gray areas that aren't solved by this.
Right.
We can go through them as we go through. But it didn't seem to me like, well, that goal was going to be accomplished by doing this. It would just be going back to the planning board. I want to have 300-person wedding with 50 staff, 250 guests, not unusual in the world. What's the planning board going to say? How many fields are going to get plowed over for parking, to make impervious surfaces, on-road, off-road. There were lots of instances where the planning board would still have to get involved and not have guidance, and that always worries me.
Sure, so I think we
Because
can
you
look
have
at
the right attorneys.
giving more guidance where needed.
No,
I don't know if,
but you could say no on-street parking.
I think we
It does
do
say
say
that.
no on-street parking.
Yeah, it does say that.
Without planning board approval.
it says, go to the
Oh.
planning board.
Go to the
Sure.
planning board.
I think the
So to me, when you open it up like that, someone comes in and wants to, says, oh, I can, we'll do it, till 10 o'clock at night with parking up and down until somebody complains.
So I think it's a really important point to bring up, because that is really, I think we have to maintain that focus, that this is, as our comprehensive plan, is something to support agriculture in our community, so that we can get fresh fruits and vegetables, that we could do, if someone wanted to have a small farm for raising animals for meats, that we could do that and allow that. And if this is something that helps support that business as a supplemental use on a minimum time a year, so that they can make a decent living and live in our town, then I'm all for it. That's why one of the very first things I want to do is strike agritainment, just because of what it kind of, I don't care what's written here, what it says in my mind, it's entertainment.
And then maybe clarify, I think the agreement with the Nonantum and Black Rock Farm is the wedding, is the wedding taking place at the farm or?
Could.
But I think they were just sort of supplying food to
I'd-
the Nonantum.
My understanding is that I don't think that they do a lot of weddings with this agreement. I think it's mostly small concerts and
But they
things
could.
like that. I would have to
I mean,
read
there
the
were-
findings of fact
There were
again.
loudspeaker restrictions, there were time restrictions, so it wasn't into the nighttime.
Yeah, 7:30.
There wasn't,
Oh, okay.
there wasn't piped-in music. You know, it was a different kind of thing than we think of as traditional weddings with a lot of speakers and dance floor and that kind of stuff.
So when I read this, I had the same concerns that you've all had, and I kind of worked out this, I guess, construct in my mind. We have to be very clear as what our objective is. Our objective is to provide farms the opportunity to sustain themselves without going bankrupt and the farms disappearing. I think to that end, to sell this to people who might be against this program is to come out very clear that A, that's the objective, and B, we're going to minimize as much as we can those activities that disrupt the community, like large weddings and concerts and those things, so that people in the town get the idea that we really want to save the farm, not provide the farm a way to make a lot of money at the expense of the neighbors who have to put up with all the wherewithal.
And also like things like a 4-H club, I don't know if there's one locally, but, encouraging 4-H clubs and animal husbandry, things that kids can learn about high school activities. If we really want to have a farming orientation, or if we want to encourage farming, let's encourage farming.
I agree. I don't know how much we can do in our ordinance to encourage things like 4-H clubs and things like that. Like that's really a resident-led program, so nothing really disallows the creation of that. But there's not. I can't think of a way that we could make that an easier process for people, because it doesn't. Like people wouldn't have to come to the town for approval for a 4-H club. They can just make one. So I think that making farming commercially an easier process is something we can certainly talk about as a committee as well. We have some other things in the pipeline right now to talk about after we finish up with agritourism as well. But I think that it doesn't necessarily exclude regulation of agritourism. And so if the committee is not comfortable with the number of events that we've allowed, or are worried about that making this into, instead of a supplementary ordinance for farmers, instead making it something that's just allowing people to become event venues, that's certainly something we are here, that's why we're here to talk to you about this. But I don't think that it's directly related to making farming commercially easier from a production of goods standpoint, if that makes sense.
But I think a lot of these activities, though, kind of de-emphasize it's a farm. It's not an entertainment venue, so taking out entertainment, I think I would certainly agree with. I think we want to show the citizens of the town that our goal is to protect the farm life and not to basically let them create ad hoc new businesses that might not be sustainable someplace else in the town.
Sure, but if you have a 35-acre parcel and you use 3 acres of that as event space, you still have 32 acres to farm on. So I think it's not really preventing the parcel from being used as a farm, and that's why we have the attendee limits as well. We don't want people using the whole parcel as a place to attend an event.
But my concern is the message we send to the town is what is this operation going to be? An entertainment venue or a farm that has some small side businesses to sustain their income?
If the word agritainment was removed, I don't think that would impact anything else that's been written on
Sure.
these pages. Would that be something that we'd agree on, that maybe delete the word agritainment?
That would be one thing.
One thing that we'd,
We could, if you Google the definition, it includes, it gives examples parentheses, corn mazes, stuff like that. So
And that's listed,
that's already a Google definition.
and it's listed as a possible, so, as an example of a social gathering event here. But I'm just, in having our conversation move forward, if that term, agritainment, was agreeable to be removed from this, then we could proceed maybe talking about what, and I have to say, with regards to the farm, I understand the concern with having an event and thinking that that event has really taken over the use of that land as opposed to it being a farming location. But I do want to say that sometimes there are people who will go to a place that's a farm because there's an event such as a corn maze or a haunted house. And then they'll say when they're there, this is really neat. What is this? This is a farm, sort of thing. And so there is something, there's a side benefit to that to consider. And I did want to mention a farm that a neighbor just told me about. They left and drove down to Ipswich for a tulip farm. And maybe everyone else has been there. I haven't been there, but there are something like 100,000 tulips that are there, and they sell them, and they sell them as an entrance fee, and then they sell them as each individual tulip, and they make, quite a bit of money a year. But that's a use of an area that's a farm that's beautiful, that could be enjoyable for everyone. So there's different things to think about when we talk about a
But
plan.
we are not a farming community, and this ordinance proposal seems like, oh, we're a farming community, and all these things are likely to happen or could happen, and therefore we need to regulate them. We went, if the comp plan is right, we went from 350 acres 15 years ago in farm land per the state definition, getting tax, discounts, to 18 acres in 2020. So the horse long left the barn. There aren't, are we going to get new farmers because they can do weddings and they're going to start a farm? I think if you ask anyone who's ever worked a farm, I can bring my wife in here as an expert.
But who's going to do a wedding that music has to end at 7:30?
That was amplified.
Well,
music, wasn't
I
it?
thought we had kind of agreed we were going to start out small and not be in the evenings. This draft doesn't say that at all. I thought that was a consensus in the discussion, that we were talking daytime events.
Yeah.
But that's not what
I mean,
was given to us.
I think we've already been asked by an existing farm, what are the town parameters? So our goal is to try to create the town parameters around it.
Well, we've already accommodated them.
Yeah,
and-
yeah, but,
And the planning board did a fine job.
Yep.
And they talked to the neighbors, and it seems to be working out.
but what do we do when the next one comes and says, well, BlackRock can do it, so we want to do X, Y, and Z, and we have no,
Okay, but BlackRock's
We
not
have no-
having a wedding at their venue. I don't think.
I think they're
I mean-
doing dinners.
I think we need some sort of ordinance
Yes.
addressing this.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to create right here.
I would be happy with eliminating birthday parties and weddings.
Right, and I'm totally fine with making this more restrictive. However we want to do that. I think we should go through it word by word.
The challenge with eliminating very specific types of events is that it's a regulating nightmare. Like, we as the office, as the code office, are in charge of making sure that people are following this. And if someone has, a corn maze event where two people happen to get married, we don't really have a way of doing that. Or if somebody has, if they have I'm trying to think, like a work retreat that is equally loud as a wedding that we get a complaint about, we can't say, well, this isn't technically a wedding, so we don't have any ground to stand on. So hyper-regulating very specific events becomes very challenging for our office to actually enforce.
Oh, well, and this also says events include but are not limited to these
Right.
things, so. So I guess to limit it, you would have to limit the number of people. We've been talking
Right,
about
not the
250.
purpose of the function.
We could have 100 people. And that seems like a reasonable, from my standpoint, number of people.
I mean, we have an obligation under the comp plan to promote and preserve our farms to the extent we have any. But we also, like our number one goal is promote, conserve the health, safety, convenience, and welfare of the inhabitants. And to me, this is promoting tourism. And to me, the balance, if you turn this into intentionally or unintentionally, opportunities for huge weddings in towns, where most of the people aren't even from here.
Well, so how do
It's a
we,
destination.
how do we allow for the likes of BlackRock to make a little bit of income and prevent what you're talking about? Because I completely agree.
Is it to reduce the number in the attending at the event?
That would
Is
be one way.
simple? So are you proposing a 100 as the maximum?
I haven't proposed any.
Well, I mean,
Well, I think we need to
put
go
something
through-
on the
I think
table.
we need to go through this and see what everybody's.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
go through it.
This was
Yeah,
a general
let's-
comment.
But I do think we're all aligned on the fact that the most important piece is that this is supplemental income to an existing farm.
And in the,
Or
Well-
one that becomes a farm, right? That somebody starts it like they did down on the road.
Right.
Luck Cabin Road, was it
Sprinkle pod, yep.
Right, so I mean, that just started as a little farm and they built it, right? And they were able to sustain themselves, so.
So
If we
would
can
you,
get something like that.
would
to
you want
occur,
them to meet the definition of a farm?
Yes.
so we're,
Farm or
Because
a-
we don't in this.
we're using agritourism, we're defining it as a use, which is accessory to a principal use of agriculture. So in this case, anybody who falls under this agritourism definition needs to already have a principal use on their property of commercial agriculture.
Yes.
Oh, so somebody couldn't purchase an old farmhouse that has a barn and buy a bunch of animals and.
Yes, they could.
And if they go to the planning board and they get approval for animal husbandry as a conditional use on their property, or if they're,
Or to do a
or if, or if
corn
they're,
maze,
or if they've
or-
been permitted, if it's not a conditional use zone, then we wouldn't allow these agricultural uses, these agritourism uses, unless they have that commercial use as a farm.
The
So whether that
primary
be animal
piece.
husbandry or actually planting.
Okay, so they
Things.
couldn't just buy an old house with a barn and start doing one of these.
That's the intent. And so obviously, this
But-
is draft language that we've put together. If the committee, we go through it and everything looks good, we will send it to an attorney who
Right.
will then put the things that we want to make sure are legally enshrined in there in language that makes legal sense that Galen and I don't necessarily know.
But in the first sentence, so I'm not sure why you included village residential as part of this, but we can get to that. But in the free enterprise and in the farm, agriculture is a permitted use, so no planning board.
Permitted
approval.
use, though, still needs to be permitted by the code enforcement officer.
Permitted use needs to be,
Permitted use. So you see, like, I believe, I can check in with
Wow.
Galen about this, but you can see, I mean, accessory apartment is in that permitted use. The people can't just build an accessory apartment with no permitting. They have to get a permit from the code
I'd be
enforcement
surprised,
officer.
but let's check.
I'll
I think
check
anybody
in
can
with
start a
Galen.
farm and start.
Actually, you
carving
know
up their
what? I can
backyard.
just, you can just read our definitions here.
That's kind of minor. I was just, in the first sentence, you use farm as a small f, farm, not a defined term. And I thought we were relating back to,
Under the definition, you mean?
under the state definition, yeah, in the first sentence.
Yeah.
And I thought we had talked about, well, we want real farms. I don't know what the definition of agriculture is.
Isn't there a number, an amount of money that has to be earned
Yeah.
from agriculture? I think it's pretty low. I think it's like 5,000,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah, there's tree, someone could have in tree management, and they don't have to have annual income, but they have to have a plan. Someone could have just get a tax break because it's open space. That's like a third bucket, which we encourage, the state encourages, and we subsidize farms or anyone who has open space and qualifies. I don't know what the acreage is
Okay.
on open space, but that's another way. You don't have to produce any income, you don't have to,
Mhm.
you just have to fit,
Yeah.
you know.
Even the income could be hard to prove that they earned 5,000. I mean, they, you know,
You could put
I
fire
can see where
lines on
someone
the
would say,
side.
hey, I'm gonna have a wedding here, but you gotta buy that tomato for $5,000. And it's gonna cost another 25 for the
Mhm.
parcel, you know? Not that folks do that kind of stuff. All right, so, but anyways, I still believe that we agree with the comp plan, right? That we're trying to come up with ways, and this is a potential way of doing it. And it seems to have been set up by the planning board's review of something that didn't exist before. So then there's sort of that basic question, when that happens, should we develop a land use ordinance to help control that in the future and provide some guidance to the planning board on how they should approach these?
Yes.
Or is that something that, that was a one-off, we don't need to do it? And if the second one comes along, we should step in. I mean, that's a sort of a question. Do we really need to even go this way, or do we let the planning board just sort of handle it if another one comes forward?
Well, I agree with the concern that the planning board is given too much,
Okay.
it's too wide an opening for them to determine something, and then there's arguments as to what that is. And I'm just thinking that the precise language makes it easy for enforcement as well as maintaining the goals of the community.
And the planning board doesn't have a use to assign to this. I think that Galen's mentioned that for BlackRock, they assigned it a restaurant use, because there's not actually anything that makes
Sure, I mean,
real
that makes
sense
sense, but
to.
they did assign one, and it was,
And it was a restaurant doing it, so it was a restaurant
yeah, so.
that they were essentially running a new dining room out of their hotel business across town.
Sure.
You know, so it fit nicely. I mean, maybe not
But
easily.
on that basic question, what's your feelings? Is that something we should address now that the planning board sort of had to deal with the situation in order to provide?
I've gotten
some
more
guardrails?
conservative as I've gotten older, and I've gotten older. And, you know,
It's funny, I've gone the other way, actually,
yeah. I'm always of the view, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
but, okay.
So
So
how
is-
broke is it, is my question. And does the fix help or hurt?
Right.
So is what the Nonantum did with Black Rock Farm, is that something that we would think would be okay if, say, the Colony was doing something similar with Rocking Horse Farm? Is that okay?
Right. Or Riding Horse Farms on their own decided that's what they want to do.
Well, they're not going to be, or, yeah,
Well,
well,
they want to be able to do the same thing that just by themselves.
Right.
You know,
Well, BlackRock was growing food, I think the only one growing food.
right.
I mean, Nonanton was the only one growing food at BlackRock. So farm to table for them fit. They didn't own their own farm. This farm was available.
Yep.
Colleen was wonderful.
Well, so take that example. What if Rocking Horse said, okay, we're not, I don't even know how they originated, but like, we're not breeding horses anymore, we're not doing whatever we used to be doing.
Yeah, and it's always for sale, that
It's
property
always
is
for
sale.
sale. So
So it
I
could-
personally would rather have somebody in the agri-business either keep it or purchase it, rather than a developer. So what allowances would we make to somebody to either keep it or purchase it, that one as an example, to keep it from being developed? Because it's gonna happen.
So what would, I mean, I guess you can't make a business plan for somebody, but I would think if Rocking Horse Farm, if they wanted to keep it as a farm and they don't have the kind of soil where they can grow vegetables for a farm-to-table sort of situation, they could go into raising cows and other farm animals and provide meat for the colony,
Mhm.
or
Or the White Barn or
or
something.
or chickens for local restaurants. I mean, if they really wanted to be in the farming business, but I don't know what they really want to do at this point. I guess they want to get
Yeah.
out of
I
it.
mean,
Somebody hasn't come here and done that yet.
So
Right.
why don't we go through this document, keep it really simple with very few specifics, cut the number of people, and not include ideas of what could be used in agritourism. And then it's there.
And it may be that the natural progression of the property in our town is not going to be farming. It may be that some of these places will end up being developed, but that's nature, things change. I mean, not that, we may not have much control over it, right?
Yeah, I'm of the opinion it would be good to have some guardrails
Yeah,
for the planning board to
Yeah.
be able to point to. And I think there's some in here that we certainly can make very easy. Specifically, I think I probably agree with you on the on-street parking, like thou shalt not have any, period. Is my thought, just because there really isn't many places in our town where you can have on-street parking and allow for basic traffic flow. We don't have really wide streets, it's hard enough for the bicycles,
yeah.
right? Can you imagine a guy's riding his bike and you got on-street parking and,
yeah, I was thinking of bikers in the summertime.
yeah.
Can the,
It's
can the
already-
wording of this first piece be a little clearer that the space has to already be being used as a commercial farm?
We talked about that last time, and Galen said, no, you couldn't discriminate between current, we had talked about, well, should you have been in business for 5 years or something like that? And Galen's response was the attorney would nix you on that because it's not fair
So
treatment.
it's, maybe one way to think of it, what would encourage somebody?
Well,
Start a
so then you're saying somebody could buy an old house / barn
Yes.
that isn't currently being used for anything
Yes,
and
Then
start some of this.
Could start some of this.
Well, then what does this first sentence even mean?
It's used as an accessory, so it's not the primary use. This whole agritourism and agritainment, if we chose to keep the word, is not the principal use of the property.
How do you determine?
I mean, yeah.
Principal use?
Yeah,
The state definition, I think, of definition of agriculture is
so
what
they
has been
sell a couple dozen eggs,
They gotta meet,
but then they also wanna do this stuff. How do you,
it's the only way you could balance.
how do they prove what's their primary?
Well, they could even, like I said, you could sell a $5,000 tomato to the guy who's at the wedding,
Right,
or you sell $1,000 tomato, you sell 5 of them during the year.
What's
Right.
And show you money.
Why is
It'll be really
principal,
hard to cook.
why is principal use underlined? What does that mean?
It's a link to something,
So
so let's follow the link, see where we end up.
Thank you.
But still, so
So,
it needs to be a.
It's just linking us to a definition that's already in your land use ordinance. The primary use to which the premises are devoted or for which the premises are arranged, designed, or intended to be used.
That's pretty
Does the
big.
state have anything within their definition that characterizes it more than just money and?
Farm or principal use
Yeah,
in
farm,
general?
Something that we could hang our hat on, that this is something you're doing 12 months a year. Is some type of
I'm-
agricultural process.
We can look at it again, but I'm pretty sure the farm definition is that like $5,000, whatever that
So
monetary.
when was that $5,000 amount put in? I think I may have asked this before. I mean, it was like 20.
I think it's been there for a few
Forever.
years.
So
It's-
$5,000, 50 years ago
I don't remember how many dollars it is to be
was
clear.
different than $5,000 today. And maybe it should be more than that. Maybe it should be $100,000. I don't know.
Oh,
But maybe we don't control the state language, obviously,
But
but
we could.
But we could put in whatever standards.
I would need to talk to our assessor about this. I don't know if we can make rules for what people can claim as tax exemptions. And that's, I think, what that farm language is used as criteria for how you can claim that tax exemption. So I would need to do some research on that and maybe talk to our assessor. I don't know if we as a municipality have the authority to make those,
So they have to get the
Calls.
deduction though.
if, to be
That's
counted
not-
as a farm by
Not in
the,
this language.
not in this language.
Not in the draft. There's no requirement that they be a state farm.
And so that, maybe that, if that's a way, I'm trying to remember if Galen said anything about that, but if that's a way that would make you feel comfortable, we can certainly explore putting that specific language into the,
I think that something like that
Ordinance.
would be, make it more, at least real, that it's a farm or someone who's trying to have an agricultural type business. I don't know what the downside is of them having to do that. I don't know if they fill out some $500 form to get, you know, what their requirements are. But if it's at least sort of somehow registered or certified as a farm through the state of Maine, then at least it gives us some validity that that's what their principal use is. So we don't really have anything else to hang our hat on.
What happens in the future if the non-farm business eclipses the farm business? And now you have a legitimate commercial business masquerading as a farm.
Well, I'm sure it would, if all you gotta do is make $5,000.
Exactly. So it's no longer,
Right, so.
no longer helping a farm make
But at the
incremental.
end of the day, if they're still providing fresh foods locally, and
Right.
it's, and the impact is
Well, maybe they
something
are
that we can
Yeah.
control that limits it to 8 times a year, it'd be hard to imagine that someone would, you know, spend $300,000, $400,000, $1 million on property. And
Yeah, no,
then,
that's-
then just try to grow $5,000 worth of vegetables.
Mhm.
and have
Well, that's,
acres.
that would obviously not be their
It wouldn't.
goal.
Yeah,
The goal would be to have a commercial property
that
that
they-
we've enabled because of this ordinance that maybe wasn't possible before. I guess I have a site plan kind of question. Let's say, I mean, I can grow $5,000 worth of food in a room a year, half the size of this, you know, square foot gardening. Grow all the seasons, successive gardening. If I came in and bought a property, or I own a property, and I want to put in a permanent, you know, one of those lovely tent structures, I don't want to pay for a rental every weekend, it's worth it to me to buy it. It's those, you know, we've all been to those weddings. I mean, some in tents, but some in more permanent structures. And I need a big parking area for 200 people, 100 cars, say. Do I need site plan to do something like that? Would I need site plan to do something like that?
it depends
I'm at
on
Rocking
the
Horse.
situation.
I'm at Rocking Horse and I buy it tomorrow.
If you're outside the shoreland zone and you have a 20-acre piece of land,
Right,
you could get a permit to put up a structure from the code enforcement office, and we currently don't regulate impervious surface outside of the shoreland zone, so they can pave whatever they want, basically.
right.
And that's not connected to any event situation. If people want to pave their lot, we don't have anything in our ordinance right now that prevents that outside of the shoreland zone.
Much to the dismay of many of us,
Sure, but
which I thought we were going to work on.
I think it's in our next round of land use ordinance changes to talk about again. So yes, if you want to, if a parcel that has the area necessary, they haven't gone over their lot coverage, which outside the shoreline zone doesn't include paved surfaces, just structures, then yes, they could get a permit from the code office to put in a permanent structure.
Or multiple
Yeah,
structures, because it's a farm. I can put up a barn, I
yes,
can put up a steel,
assuming they meet the
fiberglass
other lot
tops.
requirements.
You could do that, but you couldn't invite 200 people over that weren't your friends and family and charge them.
no, but
for
I'm
that.
talking about what
Yeah.
would be possible under this ordinance, the things we're not thinking about. So the beautiful
Yeah.
view along Rocking Horse,
But they could do that anyways, right? Today it's part of their whole,
And people are allowed to
Do
have those
that.
3 commercial events a year, so if someone is, very industrious already and they're like, I'm gonna pour everything in and I'm gonna get as much as I can out of these 3 events, we still don't have a whole lot of,
right, but
ground to
nobody's
stand on
ever
to-
done that. Nobody's ever, with
Sure.
our current ordinance, we've had one request over the years, and nobody's decided they really want to get into the wedding business or, other events on their big fields. that's not what they're, into. Doesn't mean somebody tomorrow.
Well, we've seen a couple properties in town that clearly have been outfitted for weddings for those 3 commercial events that they're allowed to have each year. So it does happen. Maybe not to the extent of paving over the lot to create parking spaces, but there are properties that clearly have been outfitted specifically for the purpose of those 3 commercial events that they're allowed to have.
So what properties?
I don't want to out the specific properties, but we have seen that example happen
Are they
in town.
like village residential, and they have a big mansion and they house a couple of
Sure, or maybe they have
commercial-
a big house, but like with, accessory structures that maybe they put in a bathroom somewhere or
Yeah.
something. So it's, and things that they're allowed to do, like these are, very legal things for them to do per our ordinances, but I don't think that it's exactly a non-issue that we haven't seen at all.
I'm still concerned about, our primary objective is to find a way to help small farms that are struggling to stay alive, find a way to supplement their income so they can maintain their existence as a farm, continue to be a farm and so forth. My question still is, what happens if the non-farm business eclipses the farm business? And now you have a farm that no longer needs to be a farm. So what happens?
Well, I think it's still a farm,
But
but
it's
the
not,
income is, they're making 10,000 on the farm, and they're making 30,000 doing events.
so our purpose,
End of the
our
year.
purpose of helping them succeed has been very, very good. We've done that, but now it's no longer really a farm. It's
Well,
a business masquerading as a farm.
No, I would think I would disagree with that. They're still producing the goods they've always produced, now they can make a living because they're doing some other things.
Again, I think this whole thing was cobbled together in order to help farms sustain their livelihood as a farm. And now we're
So
making
we're
so
talking about
successful,
whether we're
no longer
supporting
a
the
farm.
family or if we're
Yes.
supporting the farming aspect. So we're-
Yes.
The end result is it's
I
still
think it's the same, and hopefully
land being used
to grow local
to grow and,
food.
again,
Yeah.
better that than sold to a developer.
Sure, but the town's also made more revenue presumably from the other businesses and so forth and so on. But I'm concerned about the impact it has on the infrastructure, on the neighbors, on the environment, if you
Sure.
have non-farm. Farming is, sometimes dirty, but it's probably more clean than steel and so forth and so on, automobile repair and everything else. All of a sudden, this business now has grown so much, the farm has been overshadowed by the other businesses, and we have more damage done to the environment and everything else than we would have had with the farm.
So would it be fair to
Yeah.
say that having a farm starting as, it sort of like opens the door to being able to come in and use land and a more commercial enterprise, such as a wedding or another event? My thought is that once that door is opened, you would easily be able to maintain, I think, maybe a $5,000 revenue from an activity that's deemed as farming, so that you would always keep that to allow you to, once that diminishes, if ever the next owner or a new owner decided that they were not going to maintain that farming activity that originally opened the door of that $5,000 a year, would that mean that now they'd lost the right to use the rest of it in an agricultural tourism venue?
I think that's what we're discussing.
If
is
we had state
as a-
farm definition of a farm present, then if they couldn't show the state the receipts for $5,000 from farming, selling hay, selling corn, whatever, then they wouldn't be, however we wanted to draft it, if that's what we wanted to do.
So that's what I'm trying to get a grip on. So that would mean a code enforcement of what they're showing as their revenue to the state. They provide documentation, this is what we submitted, and we made 6,000. So once that's stopped, my question is that when an ordinance that would be written up that would say that this would then disqualify? It has to be maintained, it's contiguous, it's got to be
If
maintained
that's the way
at
we
the
wrote the
same time.
definition, that's what it would mean.
And we're comfortable, would that answer your question, Tom? If they did-
I feel more comfortable, we could say X% has to come from farming, at least, of the revenue. That is a farm,
Okay.
as opposed to, I don't know whether that's, is it fair or legal or what, but if it has to be more of a farm than another business. That's what I'm getting at.
I'm just not sure that the state of Maine would allow a town to have a more strict interpretation.
Well, you also you aren't going to have access to the people's tax records to know what percentage of the income.
Well,
And
That's an
I think
easy
it
one.
also is a huge variable. If, for example, one of these farms has a wedding in March, April, and May before their farming season really kicks off, and then they happen to have a very lean year where they haven't managed to meet that percentage, we're kind of putting people in a tough spot where they can't predict what their revenue from the agriculture will be for the whole year.
Average over X years.
Or base it on the previous year.
I guess I keep going back to what I perceive to be our original objective, is to find a way for farmers to enhance their revenue so they can stay farmers.
I mean,
Now, if we let them become,
yeah.
auto mechanics or, entertainment venues and so forth and so on, they're no longer a farm. If your primary business isn't farming, you're not a farmer.
But for instance, let's say I got a farm and I'm producing, enough vegetables and so forth to feed 80 families in the town if they're buying it, right? And I'm barely getting by. I do some of these events a year. I end up making more money doing that than feeding the 80 families. But I'm still making food that's feeding 80 families a year. Isn't that still a positive?
It is.
If we control, and the aspect is we control the impact of those events on the surrounding neighbors, really. It's not gonna affect people who are.
But the more of those non-farming events you have, the greater impact you have on the neighbors.
And I would rather have
Right,
the
so-
people make more money on the food or the
I would love it, but
beef
who's,
that they grow, and
But nobody's doing it.
where do you, who
So-
buys all their vegetables at a farm stand?
so maybe our objective,
We don't
It's
buy all our vegetables at a
impossible.
farm stand. Does
Maybe
anybody here
so.
buy all their
No,
vegetables?
but
at
we'd
the
like
farm
to work on that. Rob suggested that at the last meeting that we
So,
work
I
on
mean, let's,
for the November ballot,
work on what for the November plan?
a farmer's market,
Yes.
to allow that as a permitted use in some places in town, so that by next summer, maybe we'd actually have produce instead of driving 15 miles.
I mean, the whole idea behind this is not, it's certainly you wanna keep the farmers, just like with fisheries, right? We wanna keep the fishing, not because we wanna keep with the old ways, it's the fact that they bring a benefit to our society,
Right.
right? That we have fresh food, fresh fish that comes into our town, and we can choose to buy that and support them, or we could choose not to, that's our choice.
And
This brings another way of providing them some additional income, because obviously farming isn't a big booming business, otherwise everybody'd be here trying to get a farm in, right?
but,
So,
so, what I mean, I don't know how the town does it, sort of, what you were saying, Nadia, that, we could somehow, or it's possible to encourage the farmers to be farmers by doing things to help them, whether it's the farmer's market or, but I don't know how you do that. If the farms can't make it as farms and growing vegetables or raising cattle and cows and pigs, whatever, then it's sort of an artificial environment that we're setting up that is not sustainable.
well, it's sustainable in that we provide an opportunity to earn some additional money. Maybe it won't be sustainable. Maybe at some point they just can't maintain that farm, and it's not worth it. When they buy all the effort they put into it, costs them more than the revenue they're getting out of it, then you stop.
And I think that we
It
can.
could happen one year, it could happen, you could have a bad year, so you lose money, right?
And-
It happens at farming.
And I think that we can look at it from a broader picture perspective as well. And I think that Galen maybe mentioned this last time. Even just thinking about things like stormwater, like if someone has a 50-acre parcel that they're maintaining as a farm, however much of it they're actually farming, maybe they only farm an acre, but they leave the other 49 just, land doing whatever it's doing. If we allow them to have a couple of events each year that they are able to put towards the maintenance of that farm, it prevents them from needing to do something like sell it off to a subdivider. There is a lot less impact to the stormwater situation of, 49 acres of unused land than there is of 50 houses with driveways and foundations and
Sure.
and other impacts. So it's also not just about the farm. It's mostly about the farm. We'd like farmers to be able to succeed, but what the farmers are often doing is maintaining land that's undeveloped, and that is also a very important function in our town and society in general.
And that's why the state allows us all to subsidize them through farmland assessment. That's a public policy decision made by the state. The city doesn't get that, the town doesn't get that revenue. It's, it's all on us because
Sure.
we support that good purpose.
Sure.
So it's not like we don't support it.
No, we support it, but this is another way to support it.
So,
And how do we, so I think, it's kind of going back to my very first question about whether or not we need to do anything, or just let the planning board make the decision again if it comes up.
But
I
then,
think-
do we give the planning board too much leeway? Then
Well,
it'll
that's the
vary
problem, right?
every.
That they had to fit this
every
under
change in the
something that doesn't exist.
I think they need guidelines.
Why can't we just make it really simple? And just
Yeah, so it's,
cap it at a number of people, cap it at no street parking,
Take out the word agri-tainment.
I mean, that doesn't even, personally, that doesn't even bother me, because it's already an existing definition that includes, literally, it includes things like corn mazes and haunted
But-
house and Halloween and,
But
It's
not
a
limited.
commonly
Where's that
used term.
definition? Not in our ordinance.
no,
Yeah.
right.
No,
it's just a Google.
it's just a Google definition.
Yeah, it's in Oxford Dictionary. Farm-based entertainment, including activities such as hay rides, pony rides, wine tasting, cornfield maze contests, and harvest festivals.
And all of those, I think we all would agree in an instant, sound like things that are ancillary to a farm.
Right,
That's,
right.
that's what we thought of in the comp plan when we talked about promoting agritourism. I don't think,
And so that's what we're trying to
Anyone-
allow, because
right, but I don't think anybody contemplated, we wanted more weddings in town, more traffic.
this isn't an issue of regulation. There's no functional difference necessarily between a hayride and a wedding, depending on the type of the event. You can have a hayride with loud music and rambunctious people that just happens to have a trailer that comes around every half an hour.
Right.
And you can have a very quiet wedding where people, kind of just mill around and mind their own business. So it would be very hard for us to say, you can have haunted houses and hayrides,
Right.
but nobody can
Like
get
you were
married.
saying, like
Right.
Mhm.
we can't specify what type of event.
Sure we can.
Well, maybe we shouldn't, maybe we should just
I
limit the
think
number
we
of
shouldn't, because
people.
it's way too hard for them to,
But we're the people in the town. Are we trying to attract more tourists, more,
no, but I think we can
And
say,
like we do
we can
not
limit by
have,
size,
Yeah.
hours of operation,
I'm happy to go through this. I'm not-
noise, and parking. Whether it's a hayride at 2:00 in the afternoon
Right.
for 100 people, or a wedding at 2:00 in the afternoon for 100 people, doesn't matter.
It could be any kind, I mean, there could become a different kind of event that nobody's ever thought of before.
Right.
Of course.
And this says not limited to
Right.
this
Right.
here, so it could be anything.
So I think we just need to think of the parameters.
Well, I think the
Which I think-
performance,
When, who, how parking,
Number of people.
well, the
Yeah.
performance standards on Article 7, I thought were very thoughtful, and it really seemed to address some of the issues that we're talking about here tonight.
So it's 5 of 7. Do we want to go through this document?
Yeah, let's do that.
yep,
Let's limit in number 7, 100.
Let's start at the first page.
Yes, just
Okay.
start at the top. So in the very first sentence, or the very first stop, I mean, I hear what you say about entertainment, I think we'll have to spend a lot of time educating folks. To me, that just brings more of the attainment portion is actually longer than the agri portion, just in the word. So
Yeah, I think it
it's
would
more
be-
about entertainment than it is having any association with agriculture.
Yeah, and I think Nadia's
And
already removed that.
agritourism, when I was thinking of agritourism, wasn't birthday parties, but it was corn mazes and harvest festivals, hay rides, anything you could do.
Well, I think any event is fine,
Yeah,
whatever
so-
you want to do. But as Liz mentioned, just limit the number of people.
It's an interesting point, because you then start arguing the similarities between events. And someone's going to have an
Yeah.
argument for that, and it's
So-
going to be complex.
We can't do that, we just,
We,
So how- you
just
have
an
weddings, no
event.
tuxes,
That-
gowns, and
Right,
dresses,
right,
so
right.
People don't think it's a wedding. It's not really happening.
so we just, let's go through this.
All right.
All right, so let's start at the very beginning, definition. So I've struck out agri-tainment, heard that from,
Right.
and, we're not attached to the word agri-tainment anyway, so that's fine. And do we want to see explore putting the state definition of farm in there and make properties meet that definition?
I'd like to have something that we would be able to, as, your department would be able to say, yeah, I can certify that that meets a farm requirement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, if there's something like that exists. And if it requires them to submit something to the state every year to justify that they're a farm, that's fine. I don't need to see their books.
So this is, the agricultural land for the state of Maine has a definition pertaining to calling it agricultural land. Any land used or capable of use without substantial modification for production of agriculturally related products, including but not limited to crops, livestock, poultry, dairy products, and sod. It's missing anything to do with fish, but it does mention agricultural land. But there are, and then family farm corporations and farm partnerships.
But the definition, this agriculture, this is a reference to our own document, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
So basically, what would
which is
it-
245.2, it's not
Which is-
what,
So if you picture
Yeah.
somebody coming to the planning board, they want to do this, they have to, basically, they show the planning board that their principal use currently is agriculture. Maybe that means the planning board goes and walks their property and sees that they have rows and rows of farmland. I don't know how the planning board could determine that in various ways, but
well, we're suggesting
That's-
that they meet the state definition of a
Mhm.
farm.
yes,
For
and so,
purposes of getting the tax,
Meet the
Exemption.
5,000
the
requirement.
5,000.
yes. So I've put a comment there, I know that someone mentioned Galen was uncomfortable with that as a concept earlier, so I'll talk about it with him and we can
Okay.
talk
Thank
a
you.
little bit about whether that's a possibility to put in there.
The next piece on commercial use, does that make it too broad? Or should we reference for use for social gathering events?
So that, so well,
makes it
we
specific.
want to split it into two different types of commercial use because we want to make something of a distinction between, between paying the farmer for the experience of participating in the actual farming of the land or maintaining of the animals. So we're making those into two different commercial uses. So we've used the word commercial use to be a little bit broader.
But why did you
I don't
limit
want- I
that
just
to
don't want it to be-
25 people? That's what confused me. Like, why was that necessary? I mean, if I'm running a workshop on apple trimming of trees, I might want to limit it to 25, but
I wouldn't necessarily say, like, I think it would depend on the type of workshop you're running, but I think that it's certainly, we can change that limit however you want to do it.
But I would have flipped it.
the-
I would allow many more for an educational program than for
A party.
a wedding or a big party.
Sure.
To me, that's why I was,
Okay.
And
I
when
agree.
I drafted this,
Yeah.
what my thought process was that if someone's hosting one farmer is hosting 200 people for an immersive farming experience, I would be skeptical of how that is working out. How are 200 people being managed in this capacity? But if, we can certainly change the attendee limit on that one.
I mean, on that, I'm not, I mean, this is down the road, but I'm not looking to find a way, for people to find a way around the short-term rental license provisions.
Yeah.
If they're gonna have overnight accommodations, they have to meet
Yes.
these.
We haven't got past the second sentence yet.
No, but-
You're
no,
the
but
one
we
that
were-
wanna do that.
But I didn't understand why we were breaking this into two different commercial uses. and then making that more restrictive. I understand your thinking.
Well, I don't,
The piece on the commercial use, I don't wanna open it up to other commercial uses. So I think this is an opportunity for us to be really specific of what those additional commercial uses can be.
So I think that's what we're trying to do with the rest of the sentence. It allows for the commercial use on a farm for the purpose of agricultural, educational activities, or social gatherings.
So
Which
could
we
we,
then
could
also-
we have the sentence without for commercial use?
Yeah, I think.
What does that add?
allows-
The first sentence you're talking
Yeah,
about?
first sentence we're still on.
That allows for the commercial use?
So you're suggesting that allows for the purpose of agricultural, educational
Yes.
activities, or
Allows
social
agricultural
gatherings?
Really specific. So
educational
if someone says,
activities.
well, it's a commercial use,
Right.
doing whatever they come up with,
So-
hosting an Airbnb, whatever it is.
So deleting for the commercial use on a farm.
No, we're suggesting delete commercial use.
Yeah.
Allows,
Allows for the,
The use on a
Agricultural.
farm
it just allows agricultural educational activities.
and social gatherings on a farm. Maybe
Yeah,
that's
but they want to make money. I think it has to be, I think commercial use has to be in there.
That could.
We're not doing it gratis,
Right. Well, you could do it gratis, or you could charge for it, either way.
but that's, supposedly the farms want to have the auxiliary activities to sustain their
Right.
life as a farm.
Oh, right,
So you have to make money.
Yeah.
The whole point is to have a commercial use that the town approves.
Yeah.
solid point.
But I would have thought the use is agricultural, educational activities, and social gatherings on a farm.
Yeah.
That's the use.
Yeah, only those two uses, that's it.
Those two
And
commercial
then I
uses.
think,
They could, yeah, they probably are going to be commercial. But I don't see what you gain
By putting the word
by,
commercial in
and it
there.
seems like there's more risk
I bet
than.
there is
After
gain.
social gatherings, put on a farm.
We would,
Educational
we'd have to
activities
check
or
with an
social
attorney. It's possible that would be language that she would recommend us use. So, like I said, we'll go through this, and then
Yep.
if we like the language, we'll send it to an attorney. So if she feels like that needs to be in there, we'll certainly circle back to whether or not it does.
Mhm.
But for now, we'll strike it out
don't
and
forget attorneys work for us.
sure.
They'll tell you that makes it sure.
Attorneys work to protect us in this case.
What you wanna do, so they get paid a lot of money just for.
You always hire the
Right,
attorney
yes.
to protect yourself from the other guy's attorney.
Yes.
I think the next sentence, you could just say the activity must comply. You could strike all that, whether it's related or not related to agriculture.
Can I have one more on the first sentence?
Sure.
The definition of agriculture in our ordinance doesn't seem to include does it include animal husbandry?
No, they're separated.
Okay, so that's my question.
Okay, so we
I
can
thought
say,
we were thinking about someone could have horses, or cows, or chickens, or grow food. And that was, because that's the definition under the state,
Yeah, it should be.
essentially.
mhm.
So it should
Sure,
So
we can add animal
agriculture
husbandry.
or
So agriculture
animal
didn't-
husbandry?
If, I don't know what that other
But
definition is.
is there distinction because there is a different standard here? We have animal husbandry under conditional use is subject to ZBA review, and then we have agritourism site plan, so it's a lower.
That's an interesting point. I'll make a comment. I'll talk to Galen about that, but we can certainly put in, conditionally or animal husbandry
Right.
next to
Yeah.
agriculture.
Animal husbandry might require a separate,
Yeah.
higher standard.
Well, that's fine,
Okay.
I don't care.
Yeah, as long as they have the license.
But I wouldn't want to prevent that from being the farm.
Right.
Since we have sheep being raised and lamb being
Sure.
raised and horses in town,
Oh, yeah, it's a
much more than
farm.
we have food
Yeah.
being grown.
Yeah,
All right, what do you think the second sentence? What did you want to do with that?
I'd say, the activity must comply with all performance standards set out. I don't think we need the part whether it's directly related or not directly related.
Right, well, that might
I
be
don't know what
people.
that section says.
716 is the new
Yeah.
proposed
Yeah.
section.
I see, got it,
You just gotta meet the performance standards.
I got it,
Yeah,
yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Sure.
Did you want to keep the word social gathering, I mean, is that the right language as to what we're, it's a use.
Social gathering, is that defined?
We would define it.
Right here?
Yep. So we do not currently have a definition. This would be included in the general update would be a definition for social gathering event.
And that definition, I assume, would include, for monetary gain concept as opposed to a family,
Yeah, we can put
I'm
for
having my own
commercial
Right, that
purposes.
doesn't- Yeah, you have your own
because I
wedding,
wouldn't
no,
want to
no, not all.
snag people in
Right.
to this because of that.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm so appreciative of everything that's been put in here, because it's what we talked about. We've used these words, so we've put you in that position.
Yes, I read the notes when I was putting those in.
So I appreciate you including all of it. So if we change our minds, bear with us. It's just, but I guess there would be birthday parties. Somebody has a significant birthday party.
Sure, like they use the trust
Sure,
right now.
sure.
Yeah. So,
Somebody's-
So just as a point of reference, I was just in San Diego last week, and everywhere I went, they had signs posted, quiet hours after 9, or
wow,
after 9:55, depending on what town.
wow.
And the place we stayed at, I mean, there was, from a lighting standpoint, it was absolutely terrible. I thought it had a nightlight on in every single room in the house, because of all the
Terrible.
lights, outside lights coming
Yeah.
through, even doing that. But it was always quiet,
Oh.
except for the occasional motorcycle that go by, but it was always quiet.
These were like street signs, or you're talking about in the hotels? I mean,
No,
just-
it was actually an Airbnb.
Yeah.
Which was designed, it was a residence that was strictly an Airbnb.
Sure.
Like we hate, but, but that's where we stayed, and it was just outside street lights and people's lights across the street with their spotlights on all night for whatever reason. And then we went to a wedding at a really nice little place, and there was 25 people at the wedding. And actually, it was the smallest wedding I ever went to, and it was really interesting and intimate for that. Something like that happened in our town, I have no problem with that.
Right,
But that
Because-
brings up another point that we haven't really discussed, and that would be light at an event.
Sure, we'd have to,
Disturbing neighbors. I mean, I don't know.
absolutely.
yeah, you have to, I mean, let's talk about the hours,
Yeah.
then we worry about the lighting.
But I just want to point out that, and they all seem to really stick to those hours
Yeah.
and recognize that. I mean, it was hard printed on our contract and everything else that you couldn't have parties, that you couldn't have anything after 9 o'clock, it had to be quiet.
You know, sometimes that's part of the short-term rental that's permitted
Yeah.
by the town. These are the neighbors come in and say, okay, but we want this.
And they seemed, everybody that was just in the area itself, it just seemed to be following that, so.
That's
I think it
great.
became part of the culture as well,
Yeah,
so,
I think that's great.
that's when you enforce it.
All right, what else on the first page? Can we talk about the numbers in the last one, event staff?
Let's go through the rest of these definitions. Agricultural education immersion, I think that's fine. Attendees, fine. Event staff, fine.
Except that event staff
If the number of people.
leads into the question of mass gathering
Right.
permits, which I'm against.
Okay. So is that the last sentence?
Well, it cross-references, in effect. They're just telling you in this paragraph, you gotta count the event staff. If you've got 50 waiters and chefs and whatever, and food trucks, and
Right,
you've gotta count all those people as part of whatever your number is.
that seems fair,
Yeah, no, that should be in there.
yeah.
True. And so, but I think you're making a good point, is one thing you have, what does the mass gathering permit require?
That's a good question. I think that mass gatherings are given by the town clerk's office, so I would need to check with Tracy. But I can certainly look into
But
that.
that's something, okay, yeah, 'cause we should verify, is that something that like I could get a mass gathering permit, because I wanna invite 300 people to come down here and we're gonna protest something or whatever, can I file for a permit? Something like
Yes,
that?
anytime you're planning on having more than 250 people in a space, I believe you need to file for a mass gathering. I don't think it's tied to commercial activity, but I could be wrong about that, so
No, it's
I would
not
check
that.
with Tracy.
Would
But you have to prove, I'm looking at it, you have to prove, you know, it has to go through all the departments in town to make sure they're happy with what you're doing. You have to have facilities for, you know, water supply, refuge, you know, traffic control, sanitary facilities.
Why don't we just take out that last sentence?
We're not going to allow.
We're coming up with a
250 animals.
definition of event staff. That
Okay.
last sentence is irrelevant for the definition of event staff.
Yeah, you could,
Yeah.
event
Take
staff should be
that
counted as attendees for the purpose of the section. You can get rid of the last sentence.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we argue about
And
that.
then you go to the substance of that in the standards.
Right.
Okay.
So
Good point.
on the second page, yeah, on the second page, why did we include village residential?
Um,
Thought
I
all
think
were-
when I was looking through the, I'm trying to remember when I was looking through, just looking at our GIS map, village residential is actually quite large and has some very large parcels. And so I included it because it seems like a possible space for a farm to be,
Okay.
just in terms of what's available parcel-wise.
So we're going to get rid of agri-tainment there, the very first one, or anyway.
Yes.
So right now, there are no quote-unquote farms in village residential, but you're saying that
I don't
there
believe
could-
so.
there could potentially be.
Well,
They're large
there
lots.
there are
Large
places
lots.
where you have
Like
like the
along-
maple syrup.
Like where?
Opposite the school.
Oh.
Oh, actually, I think that the Christmas tree farm is in village residential.
Yeah.
Oh,
Which is-
really?
I believe so.
Yeah.
And
I
that
think
blue, is it Blue Hill? Is that what it's called?
The one
Blueberry,
behind it, Blueberry Hill.
also village
Yeah.
residential, I believe.
That's not,
What?
they're not in commercial business, are they?
Yes, well, they,
I
I
think
don't
they-
know, they collect maple syrup. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what they do with it.
I mean, agriculture is allowed in every, and it's permitted in every
Right,
zone, right?
right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I wasn't thinking there was,
Okay.
animal husbandry, I guess, is not.
I mean, you would, if you left it in, you hit against in the standards, 5 acres for 50 people,
Yeah.
15 acres for 100 people, 30 acres for 250 people, so there is a cross-check on that. So,
So I
You
guess the
know.
question becomes, though, do we limit it to these three zones, or is it allowed anywhere anywhere where agriculture or animal husbandry is permitted?
So what is this saying?
Is it permitted use?
What are we talking about here? So,
where you're looking,
well, why are these actually listed here like this? Yeah, I'm looking at
this is just telling you what zones you could do this in, and he's suggesting
all of the zones.
that, no, he's suggesting we allow in 3 zones: free enterprise, farm and forest, and village residential.
And what's the other one?
There's the Goose Rock zone, there's
There's residential east, there's Cape
Cape
Porpoise
Porpoise.
east, I forget all the
Okay,
zones.
so
There's
you're
like
not gonna
11,
allow it there?
right?
There's 11?
I think there's 11
Yeah.
zones.
Okay, so we're not going to allow it in those other zones?
Well, I guess the suggestion is
They're behind us.
that's where the big,
Riverfront,
that's where the big spaces are.
but you got like timber harvesting, timber management. That's not what we're talking about.
So I think we allow agriculture, I think in every zone except Dock Square.
Even Dock Square. No?
So are you saying,
Not allowed in Dock Square, it doesn't look like.
are you saying that Goose Rocks Beach would be an unlikely venue for an agricultural
I'm
connected event?
think that commercial activity is prohibited in the Goose Rock zone.
Oh, there is
Period.
some commercial activity there?
Yeah,
So
but they're
there's some like grandfathered existing before zoning commercial
Yeah,
activity,
go back to
but
Goose Rocks. I mean, there are some, like Melinda's Farm would be in the Goose Rock zone, I guess. There's no zone farther.
Yeah, no commercial use.
Commercial.
Oh, well,
so in that case, even though agriculture is permitted in Goose Rocks, we wouldn't be,
The
Because
commercial part of
Permitted.
it, right.
yeah.
commercial
Right.
use not allowed in other zones?
You mentioned the
think
dock. Oh, no.
Dock Square doesn't allow agriculture, it does allow commercial.
Although under state law, don't you have to?
I thought you did.
I don't think that there's, the only, farm and forest, although also I don't think this prohibits commercial use. I don't think that there's a different zone that doesn't allow for any commercial. I think it's just
I don't
Goose
see
Rocks.
commercial listed under, on this sheet here, it doesn't say commercial. So how,
There's not all, we didn't put all of the
Yeah, this isn't
uses in.
ex-
It's
this
a,
isn't-
it's just a segment.
It's
So
just
not to-
showing where we're adding agritainment.
okay.
So instead of making it a, 8-page
much longer.
document, we've
Is-
cut it down a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, yep, I agree with those 3 areas to add agritourism. And cross out agritainment.
We should just have an understanding why we would not allow anywhere else.
So I'll make a comment. I'll do some looking into that and see.
Actually, it looks like the very last one, you left in agritainment and took out agritourism.
Oh, yeah. Because they were flip-flopping the
Oh.
words.
Yeah.
Okay, parking.
So that will look a little better, I think, when the event attendees number is addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Where is the bit I thought I saw on surfaces, impervious or semi-pervious? Where'd you put that?
It's a comment that Galen left. So
Oh.
currently, our ordinance states that all parking spaces must be composed of sufficient impervious or semi-pervious material to support vehicles in all conditions. And Galen's suggesting, considering whether or not we can specify the use of grassy areas for this specific use, given that the events will be relatively infrequent and are taking place on a farm, who we don't want to pave over
Right,
250 parking spaces.
right.
I think it's,
Yeah, and traditional activities are never paved. They're always, you're going into somebody's field
yeah,
and
Yeah.
you're
Right.
parking and getting stuck and all that good stuff.
yeah, I'd actually prefer it that way.
Yeah,
Than to have some little parking lot, because then it's
Right.
really detracting from the idea that
right.
agriculture is
Defeats the whole
primary
purpose.
use.
But the question is, do we allow them to do that? Do we allow, a 150 car parking
Lot.
lot be paved on?
As of right now, yes.
No.
We do.
Do we want to, as part of this ordinance, is what I'm saying?
I,
We have the right not to allow them to do that, or we have the right?
I don't know if we do, because we don't have any other,
Yeah.
I guess that maybe the planning board could put it as a condition, you're approved for this use. As such, you can't pave a certain amount of your lot, but I would be hesitant to commit to being able to do that if they are
I
meeting
think-
all of our other ordinance
I think
requirements.
people in this town would be super pissed if they drove past, down Arundel Road, and they saw a huge parking lot having been paved for the sake of saving farmland in the town. I would think that people would be, everybody I know would be screaming at me. They'd call me and say, "Are you on that committee?"
I would be surprised
they
if
would have
someone
to-
wanted to do that.
But I think we have to
it's
No,
very
I would wanna-
expensive.
I would
so
want to do it if I'm putting up that big $200,000 tent and want to make a beautiful wedding venue that looks gorgeous. I'd want to pave the parking lot.
It might make sense to pave the parking
But-
lot, because then people don't have to walk through the mud if it happens
Right,
to be a
absolutely.
rainy day.
So maybe we add something about the permanent structures so that you can't put up a $200,000 permanent tent, and say permanent structures can't be added for the purpose of the accessory use.
That's a good one.
I think that's, again, causing potential regulatory challenges. Someone comes in, they say, we want to put up this tent, not for our commercial use, just because we as a family love to sit with our 200 extended family members under this tent. It starts to become challenging for us to regulate things like that. So I think What I think that the path forward for what you're saying, which I think is a valid concern, we don't want to encourage people to pave huge swaths of their land, is to do that through additional land use changes to prohibit people from, making their lot now covered in
But here we're
impervious
giving somebody
surface.
the right to do something they couldn't do before.
Well,
We're putting a particular commercial activity where it was questionable whether they could do it before or it was forbidden. So we could actually put in standards that meet with the times and the concerns that we have for the environment, and not just say, oh, we'll wait for something down the road to happen.
So are you thinking that pervious, something that's pervious surfaces, except I'm just wondering, it sounds almost like it's similar to shoreline protection language, in terms of how we protect. And so
Well, everything drains towards me. So, and if you saw my neighborhood in December of, part of it came from the ocean and part of it came from the rest of the town. When you have heavy rainfall in short periods of time,
wow.
like 4 inches in 3 days or less, you're going to be flooding people's houses out.
Okay.
You
There
know,
are many people whose houses were flooded
I
out.
mean, can we just say something like,
And all the people who were flooded, by the way, were not on the ocean. They were all on the back. They're all affected by the
you
river.
may
They're
not
all affected by the storm.
alter your property for the purposes of this accessory?
Again, purposes become they're a very gray area.
Yeah, but
So
the more-
for example, like someone comes into our office and they want to put a bunkhouse on their property. We can say like, we think it's possible that what they are looking to do is maybe like rent it out or something. But if they tell us like, we want to create a bunkhouse because my grandkids come to visit in the summer, we don't really have any business in telling people what we think their purpose actually is
right.
when they
Yeah,
come
but
in for a
the
permit.
more of these hard infrastructure changes you're making, the more it changes the definition of the place from a farm to a commercial enterprise.
But we
farms
don't
don't have-
regulate that impervious surface.
Yeah,
So
but it's no longer, if you don't have these humongous paved spaces on farms. You don't have permanent, meeting places on a farm. It's a farm. They don't have those things. Cows don't need that, horses don't need that, corn doesn't need that.
the state wouldn't regulate that either. If you have 50 acres of farmland and you manage to get your $2,000 to $5,000 a year off of the 25 you've left unpaved, then you're still technically a farm.
Yeah,
You
but
just
those-
have
but-
paved
but tho-
over.
But those structures you're talking about, in my opinion, are changing the nature of that location. Jane mentioned, a barn maybe for farm equipment. Sure, farms need a place to put the tractors and wagons, and so it's fine. But not a parking lot, and not a tennis court, and not a roller coaster, and all the rest of that kind of stuff. That changes the nature from being a farm to being some other commercial enterprise.
I think so. So, for example, let's say someone builds a big metal structure and they pave under it. It's 1,000 square feet of space, and when they're not hosting an event, they park all of their tractors under there and they just move it off to the side for an event. We don't really have any business saying, well, a couple times a year you use this to park cars, so we're saying the purpose is not farm related. We, as an office, can't tell people what we think their purpose is and how we think it's detracting from the rest of their property. We don't have that authority in our ordinance.
Except, I would say that if you look at this from time zero, and the structure's already there, yes, it's part of the farm. Once you give them this change of designation and so forth, they immediately build another structure, it's not a farm anymore. It's some other purpose, I think, that place is being used for.
I hear what you're saying, but if we put a specific definition in and we say the specific definition of a farm that we're using is the state definition, as long as they're able to meet that definition, we can't say, well, you've paved out 100 parking spaces, we're no longer considering you a farm. If they're still making $8,000 a year on agricultural activity, so sure, we can say like, in spirit, you're not really a farm anymore, but we don't have any ground to deny them the opportunity to do that if they're still meeting the very specific rules that we've laid out.
Unless we're smart enough to state it in this ordinance. This is the time and place
Right.
for us to get
still-
what we want and to put in the restrictions that, you know, we can live with and we think would be beneficial. We don't want to restrict it so that it can't happen,
Right.
but
How would
do
you
we-
word
do
that
we want-
restriction?
well, I think the permanent structure is a good idea, to build a new permanent structure, because if you have a, you know, soccer field size, permanent, lovely white tent, and then next to it, you have your, it wouldn't be right next to it, it'd be over there, your 150 car parking lot, also paved. Both of them have the same impact on the environment. They both are not allowing, you know, water to go through for 365 days a year, even if we only allow so many events a year.
So it almost
So-
seems as if it's contrary to the concept of a farm if you have a surface of earth that cannot be farmed, if you've taken away its
Can no longer
use.
be
So
farmed, right.
let's use the wording, no permanent structures, whether it's a building or a parking lot.
For this ancillary
Right.
purpose.
Right,
But,
They can build whatever they want for,
but they can tell us whatever they want as the purpose is. We
Yes.
can't say, like,
They can
you're
say
putting
it's
up a
for
white
events.
tent, so we know for certain this is for the purpose of hosting events. They can tell us we're putting up a white tent because it's legally permitted, you know, we have plenty of space, we aren't over our lot coverage. We're putting in this white tent because we love white tents and want to look out at it out of our backyard.
but they'd have to show that it is contributing to their farming.
I don't think that they would.
Well, if they had to say that it was contributing to the farming, they're having to say that this is a use that is complying with an agricultural use. So if you have the large white tent or the asphalt area, I don't know how you could argue that that was part of the agricultural activities of the farm to have that, except for it's the land itself. I'm just trying to think in terms of the land itself.
I would be interested to hear from the attorney, if
Yeah.
I can put a comment in here, I'd be interested to hear from a legal perspective if that's something we'd be allowed to do, because that would be expressly forbidding something that is allowed per our land use ordinance. If you have a 35-acre farm and you want to pave 250 parking spaces
no,
on it,
but
you're not
but you
over your
can't run a
20%.
restaurant there all summer long.
Sure, but if you,
Unless you come and get permission. And
So-
we're giving permission ahead of time. And with that permission, we're saying
You have these
there are
restrictions.
So-
gonna be some restrictions.
sure, so I'm hearing you, and so I would want to get I would want to get an opinion, a legal opinion of some kind before we
Of course.
made the decision to say we're
Sure.
outlawing something that is strictly allowed in our land use
I
ordinance.
think we should put that in, because that is, we are allowing them to basically have mixed use on a piece of property,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? Which they couldn't do now. I mean, the other thought I have is that what was done, and we shall not let that ever happen again, kind of ordinance,
Mhm.
right? That you can never have a commercial use on a farm. That's not what it's designed for.
Well, we still,
is not
people
what
are
we
allowed
want.
to every 120 days, so they could still have, reasonably speaking, 3 events a year.
Where is that, by the way?
Without the 120 days?
Yeah,
I didn't know what
I couldn't,
That's a good
I was
question.
thinking about that, but I didn't know where that was.
Is that for everybody
So-
or just BlackRock?
I think it's for everybody. I think and I wouldn't quote me on this.
If that's the
I would
case,
need to read it again to make sure. I think that every property is allowed to have every 120 days a commercial event.
Really?
I think.
What do you mean
Again,
every
don't quote
property?
me on that.
Every farm?
Every property,
Every property.
like every parcel
A
in town.
commercial event? What?
Every 120 days, I think.
Okay, let's
So-
verify.
Is that the maximum?
I'll
8
verify
events?
that.
Yeah, we could check that.
So right now, so the language in here, this is draft, it's
Yeah.
not,
Okay.
so 8
course.
events was a planning board approval for Black Rock specifically.
Right.
As a town-wide
Okay.
thing, people can have every 120 days a commercial event. So there's nothing, so we're allowing
You know
a
what-
few
you know
more
what
events.
120 is? I found it. It's in the mass gathering,
Okay,
which is different.
Oh,
So, which can be commercial, doesn't have to be commercial.
so you could have a mass gathering every 120
So
days.
additional requirements in the mass gathering says, all gatherings, commercial or non-commercial, shall meet all this emergency preparedness, financial, to the town of Kennebunkport, so you have to, and then it says, within a zone where commercial uses are not permitted, no parcel may be used for a location for a commercial gathering for more frequently than once every 120 days.
Oh,
But that's having to do with mass
Yeah,
events, mass gathering events where permits are required. I don't think
and where you're actually making money off it.
yeah.
where commercial uses are not permitted.
Right.
I'll need to talk to Galen. I think that there's for some reason this is sticking out in my mind. So I'll talk to him and see why. But I think that there's
But I didn't think I
Another-
could at my house.
So what we could say, I think what we could say in here then, and we'll figure out how it has to be regulated, but I like the idea of not having any permanent structures
Yeah.
built for this secondary use.
Which includes
Parking lot.
Which,
impervious.
yeah, right,
Impervious.
so if you,
Parking.
right, so,
But if a farm already has a huge parking lot, then it's okay, or a huge
course.
driveway.
Of course, or a huge barn that's existing, and they want to use the old barn for weddings, that's fine.
So you're excluding existing.
I would grandfather those.
yeah, I think we'd have to. And then I think for parking, for these types of events, you know, if it has to be an impervious surface or on your grass.
Yeah, which is what you
Well,
do.
I
Decide
don't
you
know
wanna
that
pave
we
it?
really want
It's
impervious
impervious.
surface
Well, at
either.
least it's impervious,
Yeah, but it still would look like a driveway.
but it's not my property. Just because I like it and I drive by and I see a nice field, that's fine. If I want it to stay that way, then I ought to pony up the money and buy it. That's my view, right?
Yeah,
If
except
he-
that-
If he decides he wants to put, you know what, I really would like an impervious parking lot right there. I like it, I like the look of that.
Then you have to
looking
make
up.
sure that they maintain
I
it
can't.
so it remains impervious.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely. So then it's not, but it's helping us on the stormwater piece, because it rains, it's gonna take care of the water, it's gonna stay on his property. So I can disagree with his opinion and what he likes, but I can't argue.
Let's get to number of attendees.
So, yes, let's just make sure, so we have impervious surface or their grass, the natural.
Yep. So I added,
And
for
then
this
go-
use, the spaces may consist of grassy or otherwise pervious areas.
Yeah, pervious, not impervious, pervious.
But somewhere
Yeah,
we
You
want
understood
to,
exactly what I meant, appreciate it.
somewhere we want to put in no
No
permanent
structure.
structures.
Right.
No permanent.
No
structure.
additional permanent structures.
For this use.
Okay.
But that wouldn't go under parking.
I would need to,
No, it's not important.
I'd need to think about where that would go most, so I'll put a note here in
Yeah.
performance standards.
Yeah, let the lawyer kick it out and tell us why.
Are we proposing a maximum attendees of 100 perhaps?
We haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, so.
Are we there?
I thought we were there.
716?
Permitting.
Okay.
Any activities.
So what does that mean?
Basically that if you've received approval for this use and you want to put up a tent, this use doesn't automatically let you do that whenever you want. You still need to get a tent permit from the code enforcement office
Okay.
to put one up.
Mm-hmm.
So basically saying like this is allowing, we're basically regulating people, not things. So if you needed a
People and
permit
activity.
before, you still need a permit for a specific activity.
Okay.
All right,
Numbers.
numbers.
So no event shall exceed 200, we're allowing right now 250 3 times a year on any property in town for the mass gathering. Over
Yeah.
No, we're allowing more than
250.
250. Under 250, we're not sure what the rule is, because that's not what this section deals with. The mass gathering deals with mass gatherings. It doesn't say that what happens if you have a smaller event. How
But we
many
were
of those?
talking
But
about
it has to be a
But-
commercial event.
Yeah, how many commercial events you
Right.
allow on your property. But that's, that's a question we need to understand.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's implying that you could have 3 over 250, but we don't know how many
I
Right.
know.
right now.
It could just be a glitch.
So can you
Yeah,
try to
maybe
find
they could
that
have it.
information?
Yes.
Once a day.
Right.
They shouldn't have gone to the planning board.
But how many, so how many attendees do we want? And I didn't really understand why this one, just as a matter of form, no more than 250, must meet these land requirements, And then elsewhere, we say, but go ahead and apply for a mass, where is that? Oh, then earlier, we said you could go get a mass gathering.
To include event staff. So we're limiting the number of attendees, allowing more event staff.
So if they went
So-
up to 300,
Including event staff, they would need a mass gathering permit.
But
And we can see, like, obviously if people are doing private bookings, we can't see that much, but if they're on these big wedding websites, we will be able to see in our office if they're advertising as allowing more than 250 attendees to any given event.
250 to me seems large.
yes, because you're looking at 125 cars based on 2 people.
How
each
about
car.
150?
Plus staff.
Plus staff is 3, that would take you up to 3, possible 300. And so you're saying, instead of 100, or instead of 250, you're taking it down to 150?
Just thought.
And then with event staff, you're saying it could be 200.
No,
You would include the event staff within that 150?
150, yeah.
because you're talking cars. It's still,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the cars are different because they have 1 car per staff person versus a couple
Well, I'm
that
just
comes in.
thinking, I'm not thinking like a wedding. I'm thinking like it's a gorgeous fall afternoon. And one of these places has like a pumpkin patch, you go pick your own pumpkin, and a maze made out of hay bales for kids. There could be
Well, you could,
250 or 150
maybe not all at
guests
the one time.
coming,
I
right,
mean, weddings, a
But
whole bunch
they
of people
can't-
come at the same
right.
time, and they all leave at the same time.
but they
If you have
can't,
a 9 to 5 harvest festival, people roll in all day and leave all day. So I think you need to,
Yeah.
you know, it's at any one time kind of concept, whatever the
at
number
any one
is.
time, yeah.
A designated time.
It doesn't mean that I can't have 150 in the morning for a harvest festival and 150.
You have
In the
any idea what
afternoon.
Circus Smirkus had when they were, what they were rolling?
That's a good question.
A lot, I don't know exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of thinking
Well,
on
that
rolling.
tent is not that big. It really, I don't think that they have probably more than 150 or so people, because it's a relatively small tent.
That's a good question. I wonder how many tickets.
I worked at it for years.
I went to it several times. You can't fit very many people in your tent.
So it's 100 people, 150 people, something like
I
that.
would think so.
Yeah.
So is there a distinction then between that, an event which is by invitation?
750,
What?
750.
But that's not all at one time.
Yep,
I
that was
don't
my
think they're that
memory
many.
as well, and I just looked it up. There, that big round
Wow.
tent has 750 seat capacity.
Wow.
I think that
I don't.
the
Do
number
they
of
park
people
all
is,
all on premises?
Mm-hmm. Everyone parked on
Uh,
in the fields of Brockenhurst Stable and along
Yeah.
Arundel Road.
But more people come in a car than 2 people going to a wedding, probably.
Oh, yeah.
You got a family, it's all families.
I think that the number of the volume that people take up is deceptively small for a large group of people. Like for example, last year I was at an event at the Nonantum with like 250 people, and they were all in the ballroom area, you know, fitting easily. So people don't actually need to take up a huge amount of space. I think the parking is really the big space grabber there in terms of like fixed location. So you know, on a 30-acre parcel, 250 people is going to take up a very small portion of that space. So if the concern is noise or something like that, then I can understand limiting the attendees. But in terms of actual space that they'll take up, I don't think it would be very much.
I think I was thinking in terms of the impact on the surrounding neighbors, so I
Mhm.
think I was thinking of noise and cars. But
Mhm.
when you have the 30 acres, maybe if it's enough. But I guess when looking at this, I would anticipate for taking care of 250 people, you'd need at least 50 people taking care of 250 people. So you're really looking at 300 when you look at a number of such as 250.
I'm not looking to have the largest capacity wedding in town.
But we're not just regulating weddings, we're regulating
But that's what
all.
I'm concerned about. If I haven't made that clear,
Yeah.
I've seen many unintended consequences, and I'm not looking to set a new record
Right.
for the number of people that, because right now, I just looked at Nonantum, I don't know what the colony is. Nonantum fits 175 in the ballroom inside. We can host up to 350 under a tent on our back lawn, overlooking the river. Where do those people go?
Yeah, because to be honest, I mean, if it's, the weddings are what would drive someone who has zero interest in agriculture, but has huge interest in
In
having
profit.
wedding events.
Yeah.
Right, to supplement their other businesses. To consider buying something like a farm, make it look like they're having a go at it, maybe even having a go at it, maybe even leasing it to a farmer who's working it, which is not a bad thing. But then is trying to, turn this, start with the 5 or 6 or 7, and then I hope they do a good job, try to build it into something they can do more than that. Right, in other words, they do a good job in the aspect of
Not being
a
a
problem
detriment to the,
to the, as everyone says,
community.
oh, no, that's fine,
Right.
and all of a sudden now, they can have one every weekend, which is not exactly what we're leading towards, right?
So are you looking at something like, if you had 100 and then you added 50 for the staff for the event? I think you could easily get to 50 for staffing on a large.
I think
event.
well, we wouldn't have to include the staffing bit at all if we're not going to the mass permit thing. That's the only
Okay.
time
Right.
that kicks in.
All right.
So I would say in 716B, it talks about attendees, so we could see if we could agree on a number of attendees.
Yeah.
Whether they have 10 staff or 50 staff, depends upon how high end the wedding is, or the event.
So are you also thinking that by just having one sentence that referred to one cap number, and that made no difference in terms of the number of acres, contiguous acres, 5 or
No, I
Or
think
10,
that was,
15?
that was what we directed, what we
Yeah.
asked these guys
right?
to include.
Okay.
I don't-
I'll take exception to the acreage issue here. The numbers are incongruous. If the first one is limited to 50 people, you have 5 acres. That's basically 1 acre accommodating 10 people. You go to the next one, 100 attendees, 15 acres, it's 1 acre for 6.67 people. Okay, so you get more people for, more use of the acreage and so forth. 250, it's 1.833. It should be moving in the same direction, down or up. It goes down, then it goes up. So I think somebody needs to change those numbers.
I was a history major, so.
I was I'm an engineer. So those numbers to me don't make sense.
The spread is very reminiscent of Gorham's language, which we heard from the committee that you
I don't
guys
care.
like.
It still
so-
doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it should be logical.
Logical,
It needs
yes.
to have a.
Somehow it has to
relationship.
change, should change.
I think, to me, it does feel logical that as you have more people, you want more space for each person. Because what we're looking, if you're having a 250-person event, we want there to be a bigger buffer than if you're having a 50-person
Right.
event.
Then why don't you do it on step 2?
Which
So
we
you're
can.
going down,
There-
then you're going
There's
up.
more land per person in step 2, I believe. than
No,
there
there's
is
less. There's less.
It's 10.
For, we've doubled the attendees and tripled the contiguous acres.
Now, listen, in first step, you've got 1 acre accommodates 10 people.
Yes,
The second step, you've got 1 acre accommodates 6 2/3 people.
yes.
Okay,
So it's
you're
fewer
getting-
people per acre.
per acre. But you go to 250, you got more people per acre. So you go down and you go up. You should go in the same direction. Efficiency means that.
So what would it be if the
So we can just-
250?
It'd be probably, what would be less than 6.67?
So if we multiply,
Well, let's go back to how many do we want?
Yeah, yeah.
Because this may or,
okay.
So,
Oh, I mean, so Liz, you were saying that maybe we need more for this hypothetical event where there was picking pumpkins and having a maze and.
Although if we put the wording in there saying at any given time, at the same time,
yeah, somehow to
Yeah.
get
no
that
more than
concept
X people
on the property.
on the property
At
at
one
the same
time.
time. And obviously,
And
there's
this,
not gonna be a policeman there counting, but the people doing this are gonna get an idea of what's
Yeah,
allowed.
we can add that in at any given time. That's,
Yeah.
Yeah. What about
so what
170?
happens if we agreed on a smaller number, 150, 200 people? What would happen to a once-a-year, 3-night circus? So they come in for a mass gathering permit, which is what they must need if they're selling 750 tickets. Would they be able to continue?
that's a good question.
Have we precluded them from doing what they've always done?
I-
Is there another route in?
I don't know, that's a good question. Definitely worth looking into.
So when you say 750, are you talking total for the total 3 days? Or are you talking?
No,
No.
each showing, the tent fits 750 people, and they have 2 showings a day for 3 days.
But they had also had buses coming in, right?
What are they? Oh,
Other town rep programs.
They
oh,
have-
of course.
Oh, but they have all the performers that are there.
And then.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
this-
they've got tons of trailers in the back, they sleep there. No, they sleep at my house. They sleep at host families, but there's still, like tent technical people and stuff who stay there
Sure.
in trailers.
But they have a mass
Yeah.
gathering permit.
Yeah, I'm sure they do, so I wouldn't think this would,
Well,
Anything that qualifies for a mass gathering permit
is a
would be
total separate
separate.
thing. And on a as,
they're limited 3 a year.
as event basis.
So this should never, this is,
This is
Never
under the
exceed.
mass gathering.
yeah, it should never exceed total. So I'm somewhat comfortable with these numbers and adjust the 100 to kind of reflect this, as you were saying. Right? I mean, it could be 150 or 125 or something. But
So are you comfortable with 250 people?
total, that includes all your, right,
All support staff,
support staff.
every,
So we can just
I
say,
mean, like at Utah.
250
Salt Lake City, if you wanted to go to
attendees.
a pub, you had to become a member.
Including,
and
Right? 'Cause
event
it's just
staff.
been- So that's how you
Including
did it.
including,
Yeah.
not and.
So.
yeah,
you said
that's
what?
true.
215,
Included, 250's total.
215,
So they're gonna have 212 and 38.
Yeah, I'd rather
Support
start smaller and
I have a,
see what problems we
That's
have.
that's fine, but I want that to be total people. It should be total, then there's no,
well, I think the point that, there, some of these events, I think that was taken care of, that at any given time, it wouldn't exceed an amount. Prior to that, I was a little concerned about so many as 250. But obviously, I do want an event to be successful when, it depends on people coming and getting on the hay rides, et cetera. So, but I feel that 250 seems to be a lot. However, I have seen advertising showing that they have 200 as their maximum for other farms I've seen, other barns, and
Right.
probably smaller land, well, about this size of land.
Yeah, I mean, so long as this fits in with larger events that would still be permitted under our ordinances unless we
Right.
change it. The one-off events.
Mhm.
Once a year I'm having a circus, once a year I'm having maybe I have a huge harvest festival that, where I don't even have a farm, but I'm going to have a maze.
Okay,
You'd apply for a mass gathering permit,
Yeah.
not associated with a farm. I would think we wouldn't want to prohibit that,
right.
right, so, yes,
the one-offs.
yes, right, and you mentioned that earlier, that you didn't want to stop that, success. So I think that the mass gathering is a separate ordinance that covers what we're concerned about.
Which we already have.
Right,
If we need to make changes in it to make these two fit together,
that
Yeah,
would
yeah.
to
work.
make it clear you go one way or the other way.
Right, you can't have.
If you're permanent, you go to this way, and here are the restrictions. If you're one-offs, and you're big,
Then get a mass gathering
And they
permit.
shouldn't be able to have a mass gathering.
Would you be comfortable with 200?
Here. yeah, they're precluded from here.
So am I coming in too low if I was thinking about 200 for event attendees?
I like that number.
Oh, okay.
What happens to the numbers when somebody has 350 people coming? Where do they fit?
They go to a hotel,
Have to go in.
they go to the Colony, they go to we've got lots of places to do weddings already.
But they can't get a mass gathering permit because that's too little for a mass
They
gathering.
could get, oh, right,
But could they get another permit? Is there another level, or, you know?
if,
I mean-
if you're not allowed a commercial use in a zone, then you're not allowed a commercial use in the zone. Change the zoning ordinance to allow more, or keep it the way it is.
I would say 150 attendees plus
Plus
staff,
So-
and no mass gatherings, period.
Yeah. I'm
So-
in agreement with that. I mean, I'm comfortable with 250, because that's the mass gathering number.
So 250
So we
total,
stay-
including attendees and staff.
Including everybody.
Bodies,
Okay.
yeah.
Owner, the attendees.
And you'd like to specify no more than 150 attendees? So
We're still
or-
debating that.
I
whatever.
don't really care. I mean, you could have,
At that point, the split doesn't really matter. You have the
Doesn't-
same
it
number of
doesn't matter to me.
people.
right? I mean, if
Yeah,
you-
I don't care about
if you
the
only got
split,
5
I
people
just
to
care
serve
about the
200,
number.
You're not gonna be doing this too often. They'll be like, how do you get dinner for 3 hours? Right?
Right.
So they have to figure that out, but you can't have more than 250.
It's easier
because-
to have one number, one
Have
purpose.
one number, and then the other
Yeah.
thing I think we need to add here is, if you have this approved, you're not allowed to have a mass gathering on the site.
Yeah, that would
right?
be,
So they can't do another 3 times a year commercial.
I put a note in there. I'll check to see if that's, that's another thing. I'm not sure if we can say that, if it's something that expressly is allowed. So I would just want to check to make sure that
I'm not
we're
gonna
allowed
vote for
to-
this unless
to
we.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's
contradict
part of the thing,
ourselves.
right? I'm not
Mhm.
very interested in voting for this as well, if we can't put these sort of limits. We're given a special option. It's almost like our mixed-use residential ordinance we wrote that made it pretty specific on the things they could do in order to qualify for mixed use. So these are the things, to get this, you're gonna have to
Sure.
give up,
Their
right?
parameters.
So,
Well, it's not giving up. Whatever
well,
they got,
mass
they got.
gathering. Yeah, but mass gathering, they
Oh.
give up, right? So I'm comfortable with numbers. We should adjust the 100 to whatever we need to. I don't know, you have a proposal, Tom?
Lower than 6.67 ratio, so probably have to be, if it's 200 people, it probably has to
60,
be
90, 120, how's that?
fewer than 30.
Well, 120.
Say again?
120, that's less than 6 point.
No, if it's 200 attendees, 200 people total, the number has to be smaller than 30.
How many like 200 is the number? Raise your hands. We keep
15
talking
acres.
around this. What?
I can go with 200.
No, just total. What-
Total for me is 250.
Okay.
I'm happy.
How many are 250? One. How many are 200?
Wait, we're voting on numbers?
Max.
Well, I thought we
No,
just
no, the
decided to keep it at the
Well,
mass number.
Some people are saying that and some
Oh.
people are not saying
So I
that.
vote for
So
250.
so I'm just
Okay,
trying to get
okay.
consensus.
So maximum people on the premises,
Premises.
including everybody,
But 30
Dan is
days.
suggesting 250.
but everyone else is saying 200.
Well,
I'm
Well,
saying 150, well, no, okay, including it.
So total people,
Hold on.
the number of people
200.
on the
How many-
premises for an event.
So we
Okay, how many are for 250? There were 2 hands up.
250,
There's only 1 hand up.
okay, one hand.
How many for 200 total?
I don't vote.
Oh, right.
This is not, I don't think this is really an official vote. It's more of a general opinion.
It's
so-
just to help the
Opinion.
I'm trying to cut
conversation.
to the chase on
Alright,
this
so-
discussion and not go round and
So
round
under
and
30, we
round.
have 200 total. Attendees
200.
plus
200, okay.
staff is 200. And then we'll ask you to take the numbers down from there.
So if we just add another 5 acres to make it 35, it will satisfy Tom's desire to have it continually shrink.
No, if you keep it at
So the-
30, it's the same number.
You,
Because we only have 200.
15 to 100 is the same
Yeah,
as
we're good,
30 to
Right.
200.
we're good.
So we would
Yeah,
say
that's-
50, 100, 200, 5, 15, 30.
Yep,
my understanding is that you wanted us to shrink again, to kind of maintain
Oh, I see.
like land per person.
No, if you
No.
kept, I was saying, if you keep it at 250, then you have to change the acreage. If you make it 200, I'd say keep the acreage at 30.
Because it's double
That's the same,
100.
the same ratio
I
as you
agree.
have in the second one.
So we're good.
Okay.
Okay,
Lost
great.
the
thank you.
All right, so,
Okay, on-street parking, off-street parking.
so number 3 in my notes is I struck it completely. In other words, no on-street parking,
Period,
period.
Prohibited, so get rid of the
unless approved. I agree.
Yeah, get rid of the,
They have to bring people in or they park on site. Just like, I mean, that's what the planning board decided on Helene's
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree.
property.
Yeah.
Okay, so A stays in.
But again, we need to somehow make Circus Smirkus exempt
That's because,
Mass
yeah,
gathering.
we have to make sure that's fine.
mass
we got rid
gathering.
of Matt Gadsden.
Would
Yeah.
that,
They wouldn't
mass
qualify under
gathering?
this.
Right,
They
okay.
wouldn't qualify under this.
Okay,
Or, right, so they would never be able to do this if they're gonna do the mass gathering first.
Right.
It's one or the other.
oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh, well, that's harsh, because they just volunteer that. They don't get anything from that.
What, who doesn't?
The,
Rocking Horse Stable
Horse.
gets nothing from,
Oh, really?
they donate, they
They
just,
donate?
yeah,
Probably get a tax deduction?
I don't know, but.
So maybe we write
that's-
something in there.
Yeah, they're making an in-kind
It's not commercial
contribution
use
to
to
the
them.
charity. So if they had any income,
It's-
they would be,
If it's not commercial use to them, then it
They
doesn't
can
qualify
still
as one of those
do-
3, then they can
Okay.
do this.
Yeah, we just need to
That's what-
protect that, we
Yeah,
just
gotta
need to make
protect
sure
that,
that,
for sure.
Let's see, parking for event staff must be entirely contained on the
Yeah.
lot unless transport, okay, that sounds fine.
So do we need 4?
I think 4 becomes a little redundant at that point.
Yeah.
okay,
Okay, yeah.
4 redundant?
yes, because
yeah.
they're one and the same. There's
Okay.
no distinction.
Yeah,
It's
so
almost
no,
8
so that's what we,
o'clock,
so what we do is we put no mass gatherings for commercial use, for this accessory use. So they can still have mass gatherings, but like.
Well, it is for commercial use. The fact that they're not getting the
We're
revenue
almost at the end.
is different. But
Yeah,
if I had a big farm, I could, you know, and some restaurant came to me and said, hey, I want to hold weddings on your farm, and you can eat in my restaurant forever.
but it's still the value that you got out of it
Yeah, but,
versus a donation or something.
right. Okay, sanitary requirements, I assume these are from some other ordinance?
This is the
or-
universal plumbing
Perfect.
code, or uniform plumbing
Whatever
code.
that came from,
Great.
those numbers.
So I pulled the numbers from, I think, like a commercial restaurant use is what I used as, it, in the, so the uniform plumbing code has a long list of different uses and what the sanitary
It sounded
requirements are.
reasonable to us.
So I picked the one that I thought was the closest and
Okay.
then went with that one.
If it doesn't work, we can change
Great.
it. What about night times? Number 2,
Is 10 PM too late?
in my view it is,
I think 9 would be appropriate.
including breakdown.
9 PM,
What are these,
item 2?
breakdown must take place, oh, 10.
I think 9 AM for regular would be fine, breakdown afterwards is.
Yeah, you don't need 8 AM. You're talking about on the early side?
Well, no, I think 8 AM, you need it for break, for setting up likely.
Oh, okay.
I mean, and I'm not really too worried
And
about it.
finish by 9?
Finish by 9, but, you know, I was comfortable with the breakdown being afterwards. The loud stuff needs to stop, which is music and all the rest, right?
Where was the breakdown?
It's included within the statement, right?
And number 2,
Takedown.
Including setup and takedown.
Yeah, but I want the events to end earlier than 10 o'clock.
yeah, but the event ends at
Overall.
7.
It's clean, gone,
Recording
Makes a
stopped.
sound.
Yeah,
9
because,
AM.
because I can, if I'm good, I've cleared every plate. Having worked in catering, I've cleared out and everything's cleaned up while everybody's on the dance floor. And I could shut down in 5 minutes
Okay.
and then come back the next day and clean up. So
9 PM?
I don't think we want, what's our sound ordinance?
7.
Our sound ordinance is, let's see,
That's, has it at 7, so.
it's like 60,
So at 9 PM.
Decibels or
if you
something
have this-
after
the ordinance,
7.
It's gonna be quiet anyways, get quieter anyways. It
Oh,
says
no
7 PM.
amplified sound.
so from 7 AM to 7 PM is 60 dBA, and from 7 PM to 7 AM is 50.
Okay,
Yeah, we're getting that 8 o'clock, which is our
the witching hour.
witching hour, end of our stay. So we probably need to talk about the rest of these
Next time.
next time.
Okay.
Okay. And next time is 6 plus 14, the 20th.
Yes.
We do math pretty quick, huh? Everybody here, gonna be here on the 20th? Not able to make it?
Yeah.
I think so.
That should
I
be
have to
good.
ask my brain.
Thank you for staying
Yes.
so late, a really long day for you.
Of course, it's in my calendar till 8, so
Oh,
I always expect
Yeah,
to be
I'm
here
okay.
till 8.
Okay,
oh, okay.
all right, so next meeting will be on the 20th. We'll continue this great discussion.
Yeah, no,
Anyone wants to join us, provide feedback, feel free to join.
Or email us.
Or
We have an
email
email
us.
on
Absolutely.
our page, don't
But
we?
in person is always better.
Yeah, I think they would just email me. Expect that that's the,
And after that, I'll take a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we adjourn at 8:01.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
I,
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
thank
Thank
you,
you.
thanks, everyone.
Good discussion. Thanks, Nat.